What's so great about sport is that it is played on a level playing field. It is about your talent and it is about two teams, two people competing to see who is the best at this physical or technical challenge. But it doesn't always happen like that, does it?
Sport is the purest form of entertainment. Players competing at a professional level against each other physically provides the basis for passionate support, the creation of role models, and millions of dollars in revenue. This is because sport is clean. It's marketable to all demographics because at its core, it involves no opinion, no contentious ideals, just a physical contest. And it's for this very reason that when sport breaks this mold, it's so captivating. When there are politics, scandals, and controversies in sport, the world takes notice. Salary cap issues, players in off-field trouble, and the biggest sin of all, performance-enhancing drugs.
Isn't that so true? How often is there outrage? We recently had it in the Olympics when a young girl had enhancing drugs and she was allowed to continue. You know, and you think actually the Olympics is the sort of the peak of physical, mental, technical ability. So enhancement drugs are a no-no, aren't they? Let's be honest, they are a serious no-no.
Inherent in sporting competition is the ideal that the contest is always fair, and the victors are crowned as such due to their superiority, tactically and physically. All of these attributes that define winning teams and players are earned, worked for in the gym, on the field, or in the rooms. So when players break that code and gain an unfair advantage thanks to chemical science, it's obviously pretty frowned upon. And in the world of the AFL, there's no scandal quite as infamous as the Essendon Bombers supplement saga of the 2010s.
No idea about this, so I'm looking forward to finding out.
In late 2010, Essendon's golden boy James Hird took the coaching helm from Matthew Knights in a move destined to happen and welcomed by fans. Alongside him on the coaching panel, former Geelong coach Mark Thompson, who brought along with him Dean Robinson, who was a performance coach at Geelong. Dean Robinson introduced the club to a now infamous sports scientist, Stephen Dank. In September 2011, Essendon hired Robinson and Dank to operate the high performance program, including a supplements regime designed to aid player recovery. Now, there's nothing illegal about a supplements program. Many clubs have them, and it was the Bombers board who believed that they were behind the eight ball with regards to scientific advancements in the AFL world. The intent was merely to assist the Essendon players in recovering from heavier training loads and be ready for the weekend's play. The 2012 supplements consisted of AOD 9604, which is an anti-obesity drug, colostrum, used as a protein substitute, tubulus, an unproven testosterone boost, and a substance described on forms only as thymosin.
Straight away, something called thymosin doesn't sound like... It sounds like, if you were putting that in your body, it sounds like a steroid or something that gives you something extra. So it's not a good name. The other things, like Tribulus, especially if it's in the bottle of Optimum Nutrition, that just seems like a fad. Those sort of things don't... Herbs and things. The AOD 9604 seems a little bit dodgy, but I don't know. And the colostrum serum, that just sounds like some anti-aging nonsense, but yeah.
Tubulus, an unproven testosterone boost, and a substance described on forms only as thymosin. These came in the forms of injections, pills, and drips, and were typically administered as a part of the training schedule over the road from the Bombers' facilities at Windy Hill. In addition, players were given supplements during a Queensland trip, and in April of 2012 the players went to a South Yarra clinic under club instruction and received 112 injections of what was listed merely as amino acids.
Even back then though, surely you would realise you don't need an injection to take amino acids. You know, even back then... in the early 2010s, amino acids you can take as a tablet. So for someone that hates injections, I've had 2 blood tests in my time, and one I almost fainted, but didn't quite, and that was even worse. I'm not good with injections or hospitals, but Surely players would... Well, I say surely, they clearly didn't. So that's stupid me saying that. Oh.
Early into the 2012 program, club doctor Bruce Reid raised concerns about the mystery surrounding what the players were being given. Reid had been the club doctor for many years, but was largely kept in the dark regarding the program by both Dank and Robinson, as they believed he wouldn't be on board with the new age science. The substances being administered were never descriptively labelled, which Reid took issue with, but he was heavily lent on by the club to give his consent, as Essendon believed in Dank's work. Reid wrote a letter to the club detailing his suspicion of Dank's practices, citing that the club didn't actually have clear information about exactly what was being administered. The injections were labelled as simplified versions of themselves. Reid's contention was that the only plausible reason for this lack of detail was that the supplements were either unproven or unethical. At this time, the only fear for the Bombers was that it may be a bad look for the club in the media. The club elected that express approval would be required from Reid in the future prior to the administering of anything to the players. After this agreement, Dank seemingly became even less transparent, administering injections without consent of Reid while seemingly informing the players that it was all club approved. It was this disconnect between the administration and the playing group that ultimately led to an order for Dank to cease the program in May of 2012. Although later evidence suggested that injections were still being administered as late as July.
I think the way you've got to look at it on a player side of things are, what were the players being told? And actually, if you are being told, for example, that you will be playing better, it will make you better. You will recover better. You'll feel stronger. You'll feel faster. You better jump higher, kick further. Then as a player, are you going to say no? Because in sport, it is all about your reputation, how well you do, how well your team does. So if you're going to be better in general, then are you going to turn this down? Especially if, and actually, I bet some players almost acted ignorant in this side of things, because as a sportsman, you want to be the best you can be, and win things.
The ability of Dank to continue without the players being aware the program was supposed to have been ceased is baffling, and how the administration and James Hird were seemingly unaware, equally confusing. Now, here's where it gets interesting. A main contention in support for the Bombers is that whatever happened during Dank's program did not work, as the Dons missed the finals in 2012, and that it was merely one madman with the keys to the club. But eerily, by the end of May, where Dank was told to drop the program, Essendon were 8-1, sitting second. By July, when the program supposedly stopped completely, they were 11-4. They finished that year with a record of 11-11, dropping their last 7 games to miss the 8. Compounding with evidence that the program was doing something was the amount of soft tissue injuries the Bombers wore late in the year. Hurley, Hardingham, Hibberd, Howlett, Winderlick and Davey among a smattering of injuries, insinuating that stopping the regime inhibited recovery for players who were used to being assisted by the supplements. Whether Dank's program really was enhancing the Bombers on field is ultimately subjective, but the evidence to make that argument is clearly there.
How weird.
On the 5th of February 2013, Essendon reported itself to the AFL and the Australian Sports Anti-Doping Authority, or ASADA, with regards to Dank's program. Later, James Hird, in a statement of claim to the Supreme Court, claimed that a phone call had taken place between AFL CEO Andrew Demetriou and Essendon chairman David Evans in February of 2013. In this phone call, it was reported by Hird that Andrew Demetriou stated that the Essendon players had taken performance-enhancing drugs, and that Deputy AFL CEO Gillan McLachlan had urged the Bombers to request an AFL investigation. Now, if you're confused by all this, you're not to be blamed. The reporting of this saga was incredibly loose because the media was given access to some court documents and not others.
It is really confusing. So, Essendon ended up reporting themselves? I don't really get it. Why would they report themselves? Surely they would just try and hide it under the rug, just so they don't get in trouble. It's puzzling.
But all this really means is that there is a speculative theory that the AFL knew about the supplements program as it was occurring and did nothing. This is all based on James Hurd's testimony and James Hurd's testimony alone, and the AFL denied preliminary knowledge. But the question is there to be asked whether the AFL were wiser to the situation than they let on, and if so, why? ASADA launched an investigation over the next 16 months and found a surprising amount. First discovered was the use of AOD 9604, which at the time was not directly illegal according to the World Anti-Doping Code, but was also not approved for human use and therefore was considered a banned substance following the investigation. Interesting to note is that at the time, ASADA were also investigating the Cronulla Sharks for the use of supplements, and a key detail emerged from this investigation, now close to its conclusion. Employed as a sports scientist at the Sharks in 2011 was none other than Stephen Dank. In August 2013, ASADA released its first report. There were no clear findings about whether the supplements being used were banned, but ASADA listed a series of failures on the part of the club that allowed such a contentious program to operate, despite it not being outright illegal.
So are we saying that none of the drugs they actually took were illegal? They were dodgy, but not illegal? Because then there isn't really an issue. Until you make something illegal, then there isn't a problem, surely. This is confusing. And I'm sure you guys will help out. And I'm sure you'll help out and with the comments down below. And also, while you're there, make sure you like and subscribe. Little plug.
The AFL used this report just 7 months into the investigation to charge the Bombers, a move the club was not ready for. The charges were mostly regarding exposing players to health risks and not regulating Dank's injection activities. Amazingly, the AFL laid out the majority of its penalties to the Bombers here, 7 months into the 16-month investigation. The Bombers copped a $2 million fine, were forced out of the 2013 finals, and was disallowed their draft picks. James Hurd was suspended for 12 months, and Mark Thompson was fined $30,000. Dr. Bruce Reid was also charged and suspended, but when Bruce said he was going to take the AFL to the Supreme Court, they dropped all charges, seemingly recognising that Reid was not privy to the extent of Dank's program. At the conclusion of their investigation, it was now ASADA's turn to lay down their findings. So, on the 12th of June 2014, 34 Essendon players received court orders, accused of taking a banned substance. The substance that had been listed on consent forms as thymosin was found to have been thymosin beta-4, a peptide that enhances wound repair, listed explicitly as a banned substance.
So by the sounds of it then, what they initially said they were being given, or what they were giving the players, wasn't necessarily a banned substance, I assume, until they actually dug deeper and it was this thymosin beta-4, which is, I love how the bottle says, for veterinary use as well. So yeah, look, if it is a banned substance, then tough, you're in trouble.
This little peptide and the discovery of its use was the smoking gun. ASADA did not conclude that the players were aware, but that the club was. Despite this, ASADA issued the mandatory 2-year suspension, rubbing virtually the entire Essendon playing list out for the following seasons.
Ouch.
Along the way, Essendon mounted a series of appeals to various bodies, attempting to contest the treatment of the investigation more so than the findings. As mentioned previously, James Hurd mounted a challenge in 2013 to the Supreme Court, claiming the investigation was a breach of due process, and certain portions of the investigation that were released were designed to hurt Hurd's reputation. Essentially, his personal beef with ASADA was that they were framing him as the primary villain of the saga. He lost that bid and in the process, a lot of legal costs. Keep in mind that this appeal was following ASADA's first report and before they had discovered that the peptides the club were taking were banned. This suggested an element of deflective guilt on Hurd's part very early on, although whether he knew what the players were taking is still up for debate.
So I don't know how different it is with AFL and football, as in soccer, but obviously in football you have a manager. You have a chairman and the owner. But the manager should pretty much know everything that is going on in the club. The manager should know everything about the players, their medical treatment. So the equivalent here is Herd as the coach, the head coach. So he should take responsibility in the fact that he should know what his players are, what their current situation is, surely. This man, bear in mind, I think it said that he was obviously brought in, he brought in the assistant, brought in the medical guy as well. I'm pretty sure it said at the start, correct me if I'm wrong. So, sadly, the buck has to stop with him. You know, that's the thing in football, for example. Now, this isn't talking about drugs, but if a team is playing badly, the buck stops at the manager, sadly, not the players. And in this situation, he must have known what his players were taking. Look, they would have had to take time out to go to the medical facility. How would he not have a clue? Surely he would.
Following Asada's second report in 2014 alleging that the players were taking the explicitly banned thymosin peptide, the club itself launched a separate court appeal, their claim being that the alliance that was formed between Asada and the AFL was unlawful. Essentially, Asada compelled Bombers players and officials to be interviewed during the investigation. Essendon argued that while the AFL possessed the power to force players to be interviewed, Asada did not, and therefore the investigation was unlawful. But 3 months later, the federal court ruled that Asada acted lawfully, and that the players were to serve their suspension.
By way of conclusion, in my view, Asada complied with the rule of law in establishing and conducting, in the manner and for the purposes it did, the investigation.
The Essendon administration did not appeal this decision, but Herd, acting alone, decided to appeal again, most likely losing his job in the process. But he didn't lose his job. But neither did his appeal work, finally submitting to the proceeding after over a year of court battles.
How did he keep his
job?
job?
This might seem pretty cut and dry. Asada handed down his suspensions and the players served them, right? Well, not quite.
What?
This story still has many twists and turns yet to come. And in part 2 of this saga, a look into the AFL tribunal's handling, the final decisions, and how Essendon managed to get themselves out of this hole and become a competitive side once again.
Well, I will certainly watch that second part, so stay tuned for that. Surely they served their time. Do the crime, serve the time. How he kept his job as the manager coach is madness, but it is confusing because surely the club as a whole, the owners of the club, or not necessarily the owners of the club, but the club would know what is going on with their players. Surely players would speak. Do you know what I mean? Players would accidentally speak too much. How much did the players know, really? Were they let in on the fact that actually these drugs will make you better or will make you recover better? But maybe that was their ignorance. I don't know. But this seems absolutely insane, and it seemed to drag on a fair bit. It wasn't a short, right, you've been punished or whatever. It seems to have dragged on, especially with all the appeals. These scandals like this are crazy to think because it happens in all sports. It really, really does. Whether it's overspending, whether it's drugs, it's happening in every sport because sport is so reliant on winning. It really is. At the top level, it is all about winning. And if you're not winning, then you're not making money. And that's what it all comes down to. A really puzzling one, though, the scandal that broke the AFL. Well, feel free to let me know more in the comments down below, and I will catch you next time.